This is Pixelated Audio, and you're listening to episode 172, Uchuu Keibitai SDF. All right, welcome back to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it. We're your hosts. I'm Brian, and this is Gene.
Hey.
And today we're going to be playing music and talking about Uchuu Keibitai SDF for the Nintendo Famicom, released in 1990 by HAL Laboratory, composed by Jun Ishikawa and Zap Rodeo, aka Hideki Kanazashi.
Yeah, Jun Ishikawa, early experience with body horror, before the Kirby series.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Have to get that in there. So that track that brought us in was the starting demo. It's short, but nice little punch to start off the episode. Excited. I've been wanting to cover this soundtrack for a while. It's a short soundtrack, maybe a whole 10, 15 minutes worth of audio. But there's a lot of energy packed into this, even though the game isn't exactly that fast moving. So
yeah, it sounded a little bit like a Konami soundtrack when you played it for the first time. I didn't realize it was HAL until I kind of looked into it. But yeah, I know almost nothing going into this show, so I'm kind of letting Brian drive. But I like the music. I like what I've heard of it so far. It's a cool little soundtrack. It's got just these, kind of high energy tracks that we're going to be listening to throughout this episode. But the game itself is not really that fast paced. But it does kind of give you that sense of urgency, that sense of kind of stress that you would expect from any other shooter on the Famicom. Now, Uchuu Keibitai SDF literally translates to Space Defense Force Team or whatever. And yeah. SDF is Space Defense Force. So I don't know why they sandwiched it up like that, but sure. The game was released for the Famicom in summer of 1990, so fairly late in the console's lifespan. And it was both published and developed by HAL Laboratory. So we'll get into the company a little bit. We've talked about them before, but let's start off with stage one. So let's take a listen. All right, that was from stage one, composed by Jun Ishikawa and Zap Rodeo, aka Hideki Kanazashi. It's hard not to say it like that. I love those pseudonyms that people use. I know that for all the reasons we talk about it, anonymity and poaching and things, but Zap Rodeo is a pretty great one, I got to admit.
That's a good one. It doesn't get more like American cowboy than that. Hideki Kanazashi had a lot of these pseudonyms, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But this track is really punchy. That bass is so driving and just really sets the scene and the mood for getting you started off on this game. And the game itself is just, I guess it's what you would expect from any other shooter. There's not really a whole lot there, but the music really definitely ups the ante a little bit.
Oh yeah, I love 80s vertical shooters. I grew up playing a lot of Starship Hector, or Hector 87 as it was called in Japan, just to give you an idea of how late this game was, coming out 3 or 4 years later. So
yeah, and, it's been a while since we actually just did a good old fashioned Famicom soundtrack. So excited to kind of go through this. Actually, we've been doing a lot of kind of offbeat and stuff, and kind of spotlights on certain things like Canyon.mid we did, and it's fun to get back into some Japanese shooter NES stuff. So
yeah,
pretty cool. HAL Labs is a game developer we talked about on probably 4 or 5 episodes at this point, at least. They were founded in 1980 and started off doing titles for the MSX and the VIC-20, but later began developing strictly for Nintendo and its platforms. And the relationship between Nintendo and HAL is interesting. But to put it short, like Nintendo bailed HAL out of financial like rough patch because they were struggling with, just the business was just struggling and it wasn't doing so good. But they had a lot of talent there. So HAL became almost like a member of the Nintendo family, even though the companies are financially independent from one another. And then to go a step further with the relationship between the two companies, when this bailout happened, Nintendo was like, okay, so we want you to make games strictly for us. But the president of HAL was on board with that. However, said that he would like to see Satoru Iwata become the Nintendo president. And that's an interesting request there, and the fact that it actually ended up happening was also kind of strange. I'm not sure if that actually was the deciding factor, but it could have led to that. And I know we brought this up before, but a little bit about Iwata. He got his career start off as a software engineer at HAL, so it was probably this. I want to say like, hey, this is one of our guys. Can you make him the lead here? And another fact about HAL is that I remember we talked about this way back in like the Kirby episode that we did, but it got its name simply because each letter in HAL is before IBM.
Oh, sure.
Not sure why that's even relevant, but
I don't know. Maybe the characters sit a little bit differently in the phone book over in Japan, because that was the whole like get your name with as many A's as possible in English. Quadruple A plumbing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's get into another track here. This is the boss track. This plays after all the stages except the final stage. Let's take a listen.
All right, that was the boss theme from Uchuu Keibitai SDF, and honestly, what's there to say? It's a very short tune. It's like 12 to 15 seconds.
Menacing boss track.
Exactly.
That was pretty good. I mean, again, it's that sense of urgency, not really, that, bombastic or anything. It just does its business, gets out.
But the boss is approaching. Take it or leave it,
All right, let's listen to stage 2. From Uchuu Keibitai SDF. All right, that was from stage 2. And there's, again, not much to say. This is the reason why I wanted to sandwich these two together is because they're both short and they it's got this really like weird kind of like ambient background like filter thing going on. That's just like, it's not like, I don't know, that exciting, but it's got this, again, this like really growling urgency that something is coming up. But it never does.
Interesting use of that rolled kick drum. I thought Brian was tapping the mic at first. I'm like, what's going on here? That's just they decided to get a little bit clever with re-triggering that sample. It's an odd effect. I don't know if I like it, but it was a choice.
Not every track is amazing in the soundtrack, but let's go ahead and I want to talk about the composers, but let's move on to stage 3 and then we'll get into it. All right?
Sure. All right, that was stage 3 from Uchuu Keibitai SDF, and classic space shooter adventure on this one. Great track,
dude. This is every time I hear this, it reminds me of Contra. The part that you're going. It's like the vertical moving one where you're going through the labyrinth, the facilities. Where you have to move forward.
Oh, sorry. I think I meant the jungle. Yeah, no. When it's the like kind of the behind the back.
Yes.
Perspective.
Reminds me of that like right away.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
they took some of that.
Yeah, no, we didn't get a chance to talk about it before, but I got to say, HAL during this period was really like kind of they were doing some interesting stuff. I'm curious why Nintendo chose them out of any of the third-party developers to partner with, because there were so many Japanese companies we've talked about on the show that, if things had turned out differently, it could have been them. I mean, they were making cool and interesting games. They just went by the wayside or went a different direction. I just don't know what it was about HAL specifically that caught their eye, but
I don't know exactly what the relationship was beforehand. I mean, Iwata probably had some sway in this, but at the same time, there was a lot of talent there.
Oh, no doubt.
A lot of engineering talent. And
they went on to be an amazing company for Nintendo. I'm not saying that it was the wrong choice. It was just like, what is it? Hindsight's 2020, right? But on the surface, they don't look all that different from any of the various Japanese devs we've talked about.
There must have been some inside knowledge we just don't know about.
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's not like Nintendo to just bring on a third party like that, even back in the 90s.
Yeah, they were very selective, yeah.
And so they must have seen there must have been something behind the scenes with, understanding the talent, understanding the way that the company works. Maybe it fit in with Nintendo's, culture and at the time, and it just seemed like a very natural selection. So
yeah,
it's hard to say. All right, so the sound team for this was Jun Ishikawa and Hideki Kanazashi. Jun Ishikawa is a Japanese composer and sound designer known for his work at HAL Labs, and he joined HAL in 1990, just before Hiroaki Ando. We talked about Hiroaki Ando before on the show, and he's often worked alongside Ando in a lot of his soundtracks, but on occasion he's done some solo stuff. And some of the examples of Ishikawa's work are, as the leading composer, are on Kirby Super Star, Alcahest, and Hyperzone. So this is the premier soundtrack that he worked on. So if a lot of this is any example of the work that he's done, it's definitely a strong start. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, don't need to sell him short, Brian. He's basically Mr. Kirby, Jun Ishikawa.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's written, I think, most of the mainline games, probably a couple of the side games, too. I'm looking at his
alongside
Nintendo.
A lot of others, though, for sure. So, I mean,
for sure.
not 100% responsible for all the work, but yes, is very a notable composer for the Kirby series.
Exactly. And, what year was the original Kirby game? Was that 91? Was it right after this?
I think it was 89. No?
No, I think it was later than that. Wait, was he not on that one? Hold on. Yeah, I'm sure he was.
I think Jun Ishikawa did the original Kirby and then so the first the first one was 1989 for the Game Boy. And then
92 for the Game Boy. I'm looking it up. Yeah.
Oh, is it 92 for the Game Boy? Okay.
Yeah. Kirby was later. It always feels like it was earlier than it was, but it was actually even later. It was like 92, 93.
Right. Because, like, I think that it came out for, like, Kirby's Dream Land was one of the ones that we did a whole show on it, right? Like, back in, like, beginning of this podcast. Like,
yeah, I think in 1993 we did that show.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but the soundtracks are all stellar. They've got a lot of bubbliness to them, but this one definitely is a different caliber. So I really like it. I think it holds up. It's a great NES soundtrack. Let's talk about Hideki Kanazashi, but first let's play Stage 4. Short but sweet. That was Stage 4 from Uchuu Keibitai SDF. So Hideki Kanazashi was a composer at HAL Laboratory, where he worked on music and sound from some of the earliest games, including the Eggerland series, along with Hiroaki Suga. He's appeared on credits with different pseudonyms. I think Zap Rodeo is the coolest one. He's also got Rodeo Kanaguchi, Zap Ajisai, Escaper Kanaguchi, and probably a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his list here. The one that jumps out to me most is the Adventures of Lolo series. That's probably, at least in the US, the one that it was the biggest of all of the games I'm looking at.
Absolutely. There was Air Fortress.
That was a pretty good one, yeah.
Mach Rider F1 Race. Adventures of Lolo 2, Rollerball, Adventures of Lolo 3, and I think there was a Famicom Disk System game on there. I can't remember which one. Oh, that was 3D Hot Rally. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. And who could forget Othello? Brian,
yeah.
Come on.
Sorry. Thought I mentioned that first. But yeah, like a pretty stellar and long-running composer at HAL. Did a lot of stuff all the way from, the early mid 80s to 1991 apparently. So yeah, good old-fashioned Zap Rodeo. You ready for Stage 5? I don't really have anything else.
No, I'm good to jump Rodeo. In. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right, this is Stage 5.
That was Stage 5 from Uchuu Keibitai SDF, and it's kind of a weird track. The bass line is like a little unsettling.
Well, I don't know if it's the earphones I'm using right now, but I mean the bass is really, really intense. Like, oh yeah, really intense, like overpowering, which is it's pretty cool too. It kind of has a little bit of the Sunsoft, but maybe a little rounder instead of that edginess. But at the same time, it's got a lot of the drive that we hear from some of the Sunsoft titles.
Well, yeah,
I like this.
It's a fast-moving bass with like pitch bend on it, so it creates this kind of like kind of loopiness to it, which you don't hear a lot. I can see why, but I think for a vertical space shooter, it makes sense. There's a lot of, like you're always got enemies closing in on you, that sort of thing.
Let's solo that out for a second. Yeah. Definitely has that intensity.
Yeah, I'll say.
Anyways, let's talk about the game. SDF is a vertical shooter. It's fundamentally pretty simple. There's not really any points scoring or HUD on the screen, so it keeps you in the pure action. It's not really that frantic, so it tries to keep you focused on destroying everything, since stuff can shoot you from off screen, behind you. It's a kind of frustrating, actually. I was just playing it a few minutes ago, and it's like if you don't kill something, like you might have just this random like bullet fly at you from behind. So the game, though, unlike a lot of shooters, is pretty slow moving. So it just doesn't have the same, I guess, urgency if the music wasn't on. You know what I mean? There are some power-ups and capsules that just kind of appear, and they give you greater firepower, reconfigurable armor, and that's kind of the main selling point here, to kind of boost your ship up. And there's armor that can be moved to the front of your ship or the back, and it will destroy enemies too if you happen to ram into them. So yeah, the faster you rear, it'll also grant a special small speed boost. So learning to use the armor is pretty key to surviving the game.
So I haven't played this one, and I definitely, just watching video of it, I don't see anything really to set it apart. But if it's
you know what though, sometimes it comes down to just wanting to put on something that you haven't played and give it a shot. It's not one of those titles I'd be like, oh man, I can't wait to get home and play Uchuu, Keibitai SDF. It's one of those things like, hey, I'm just scrolling through my list of things here, and just pop it on, play a little bit, turn it off, be done.
Yeah, and that's fair. To be honest, I've been trying to get a little bit into shmups lately, not like, high level play or anything, but what I found is often like really subtle differences is the difference between whether the game really gets its hooks in me and it's something that I kind of play a couple of levels of and just sort of fall off.
Right.
And there's so many of them out there that you really got to find the one that clicks with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is the one that clicks with me, but it was enjoyable. I like the game. Let's listen to stage 6, and we'll be right back. Stage 6, composed by Jun Ishikawa and Mr. Zap Rodeo.
What's interesting about this pairing, and we don't talk about this nearly often enough, but like that sort of mentor relationship, like we now think of Jun Ishikawa as kind of like this legendary composer who's been around the block, but this was his first game. So a lot of the interesting Famicom tricks definitely have to come from Zap Rodeo, because these are all like advanced late NES stage, percussion channel pops and weird uses of
absolutely
square wave. Because like honestly, I don't think I would have been able to come in and figure all that out as a first game while I'm like actively writing music and developing. Like, so it's not a name that we see that often because he kind of worked for HAL during the period where it was mostly still HAL and then left at least composition. But what was his actual name? Sorry, Hideki Kanazashi. I definitely think he imparted a lot of really important like sound design tricks to help him on his career to Jun Ishikawa.
And the fact that this was a later game, there was a lot of kind of library in HAL's repertoire to base their sound off of as well. I think
that's true. Yeah,
not only the mentorship, but also just the historical backlog of titles they already had with amazing soundtracks. So let's get into stage 7 here and take a listen.
That was stage 7, or the final stage of Uchuu Keibitai SDF, and surprise, it's the biomechanical level.
Yeah, it's a cool track. I really like the it's almost like engine sounds, right? Like the it's got this really just kind of throbbing, pulsing disgustingness to it that's I think gives it a lot of the meat for sure.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this soundtrack is I was kind of expecting a little bit more, the upbeat, major scale adventure stuff. This one, very heavy usage of, I'm going to call them effects for lack of a better term, but dissonance, low rumbles, weird percussive things. I won't compare it too closely to like Metroid, but I think it's using kind of that sort of sound palette a little bit more than like your typical vertical shooter game, which it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm glad to see that they were doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this title is that the game itself, being a later game, it uses the Nintendo MMC5 mapper, and this is a game pack board that basically is assigned to mapper 5. Some games that use it were Castlevania 3, Just Breed, Romance of the Three Kingdoms 2. But one of the first games was Nobunaga's Ambition 2. But anyways, the thing is, this actually had a lot of advanced features for the system. And this is, obviously 1990, a little bit later, so there was a lot of these tricks ironed out. And so it had even like scan line detection with counter configurable IRQ, 128 kilobytes of WRAM. And while this game doesn't use them, there's 3 extra sound channels. So there's 2 pulse channels identical to those on the NES APU, and also an 8-bit raw PCM channel. Now, again, this game doesn't use any of those, but it's, it had the ability to do it. And it could have just been they just didn't utilize that sound, or they had maybe developed it or written the sound without considering the hardware. But they could have even taken it that step further if they had chosen to.
Well, they might have had bigger plans for it. I mean, I'm looking at like you mentioned, some of the games, but Castlevania 3 and HAL's later game, Metal Slater Glory, which is like one of these super rare, expensive games that uses, the extended sound chip. So they may have thought that like this was a good, tester game to put on that, and maybe budgetary reasons they couldn't get around to doing the more advanced stuff. But there were I'm trying to remember, what was the Mario 3 one? Was that MMC 3? Or am I thinking of something else? What was the Super Mario Brothers 3 game mapper?
Ooh, good question.
I thought that one was also on, because it had like the smoother scrolling and stuff like that.
Right.
I can't keep the numbers straight on which one it was. Oh, it was in the MMC3. So yeah,
was it the MMC3? Okay.
Yeah. Because I know, we talk about that too. Like the whole idea of the mapper chips. It wasn't just the audio, of course. For our show, it makes the most sense, but smoother scrolling, nicer sprites, all sorts of additional features that make NES games kind of stretch the lifespan of the system out a little bit longer.
There are some neat effects in this game. Like some of the asteroids have this like rotating, moving effect. It looks really neat. For the time, it was a lot simpler than just like a single sprite that doesn't move. Right, like this actually has some kind of depth and art to it. So, yeah, I mean, why they didn't use the extra sound channels, I don't know, but maybe it just wasn't in the cards for this title. So we have another track here. This is actually an unknown track because it's only available in the sound test of the game, which I was looking on the cutting room floor. You have to like be on the title screen and hit A, B, start and select at the same time. And then you can, it's one of those hidden sound features, but really cool nonetheless. Glad it has that in there. This is unknown tracks. Let's take a listen. That was an unknown track from the game Uchuu Keibitai SDF, composed by Zap Rodeo and Jun Ishikawa. This is probably my favorite track in the game.
I like it, but I'm trying to put myself in the mind of the composers, and I think if I had to guess, it's tonally a little bit different from the other ones. Like, it's
absolutely different.
Yeah, the stage 1 track has a little bit of that, but then it's sort of like, okay, enough with the happy stuff. Let's go into the weird.
This has that more happy tone, and it also it's more melody driven than some of the other ones. So, but it's a cool track nonetheless.
This one, you know what this reminds me of is the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game for the NES. There's a lot of that going on.
It's because a lot of that bouncy dum. Yeah. All right, let's get into the final boss track. That was the final boss track, and surprise, very uneventful sounding.
Well, it's basically you're fighting Bowser, except he's a giant space baby.
Yes, a giant space baby.
What do you expect? HR
yeah.
Giger was like on speed dial for every Japanese developer from like 1985 to like 1992, you know?
Absolutely. Anyway, so I mean, it's a short show, but today we covered Uchuu Keibitai SDF on the Nintendo Famicom. And this was composed by Hideki Kanazashi and Jun Ishikawa. It's a lot of fun soundtrack. I mean, it's short. I just really have been dying to talk about this. And if you like the show, you can check out some of our past episodes. We did that Kirby one, since we already mentioned that. It was episode 14. I had to look it up. 14. It's probably like 7 years ago now or something. But if you want to find the show notes, you can go to pixelatedaudio.com. And we'll have the track list there. And if you have not already, join our Discord.
Yeah.
It's a great place to chat, share some good music, and hang out.
If you like that kind of music, scroll back into our episode list and look for a picture of a spaceship. That's
there
we
you
got
go.
a lot. We used to cover a lot more. We did an episode on Gyrus way back, 116. Vertical shooters have great music. Oh, Dangerous Seed was a pretty good one too. That was 108.
That was good.
Yeah,
that was good.
Kind of forgot about that one because it doesn't have a number on it.
Falcium, Famicom Disk System. We did Falcium I want to say 6 years ago too. That was a good one. Anyways, if you like the show, leave us feedback. We'd appreciate that. You can find us on Discord. We're also on Twitter and other social media. If you're new to the podcast, make sure you go back through our backlog. We got a lot of really fun stuff. And we have one final track taking out the show. This is the ending track. And it's pretty good. Gene, got anything left to plug that I haven't mentioned
I don't
already?
have any plugs, but I will say, if we're coming back to NES stuff, Brian, I might hold you to that because I got some stuff that I want to talk about. But we'll...
Nope. We already did it. Bye. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Maybe next time.
Next time. This is the ending track from Uchuu Keibitai SDF. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you back very soon for the next episode.